Hi to everyone. I will try to give you a general conceptual framework about a highly actually controversial topic in both national and international politics in today's world, which is integration of immigrants, and further about two different and in a sense conflicting political paradigms about how to integrate immigrants, namely multiculturalism and assimilationism. Okay, first of all, we should ask why integrating immigrants is a controversial topic. Why it's not an easy topic, in other words. First of all, international migration brings together different people from sometimes very different cultural backgrounds. So it creates a kind of hybridity or multiculturality, in which case the compatibility of those different cultural backgrounds of the local people, of the immigrants, of different immigrant groups actually becomes a question, of course. Cultural hybridity or multiculturality is not just a problem or question or a fact only between the immigrants and the local populations. Local populations themselves have some cultural heterogeneity among themselves as well. I mean, local peoples, local populations are divided along ethnic lines, along different religious or cultural lines as well. But when it comes to nationals of a country, of local populations, we have some bonds, some legal and political bonds which go beyond our cultural differences. So, first of all, I mean, one of the most important one of them is citizenship, for instance. Regardless of our cultural differences in terms of, as I said, ethnicity, religion, or in any other cultural trait, we are all bound together by the legal and political concept of citizenship. We are citizens to the same country, even if we have some cultural differences among us. But this, especially the traditional conception of citizenship, falls short when it comes to integrating immigrants. Why? First of all, of course, obviously, most of the immigrants, or a considerable portion of the immigrants, are not citizens. Okay, so they do not enjoy citizenship rights. But not just that. Integration becomes a problem because, the majority or a considerable portion of the immigrants stay at the destination country. Okay? So we can expect that at least some of them will become citizens of the country they stayed. But even in that case, for instance, all of the immigrants become a citizen to the destination country, still the traditional conception of citizenship rights fall short of solving the problem we call integrating immigrants. Why is that? It is mainly because the traditional understanding of citizenship is limited in terms of recognizing cultural diversity. Okay? It is not about acknowledging cultural diversity, but about bringing together, about surpassing actually those cultural diversities. In order to understand the debate on integration of immigrants, first we have to have a general understanding of what this traditional conception of citizenship rights mean. Okay? The traditional understanding of citizenship rights, which was formulated actually in the aftermath of the Second World War by T.H. Marshall, divides citizenship rights into two general categories. According to Marshall, citizenship offers people and the nationals three categories of rights. One of them civil rights. I mean, freedom of speech, freedom of thought and faith, right to property, right to justice, etc. Okay? One group of the categories is civil rights. Then comes political rights, like participating in decision-making processes and in the exercise of political power. For instance, right to vote, right to form political parties, or right to join political parties. And then comes the third group, social rights, which is exactly the point where our topic, integrating immigrants and the deficit of citizenship rights in these terms, revolves around. Okay, social rights. Marshall himself defines social rights in general as such: to live the life of a civilized being according to the standards prevailing in the society. Okay. This is the general definition of Marshall. What does he imply by that, by social rights? Okay. On the one hand, it has a social implication. Social equality implication. I mean, in spite of economic and class-based inequalities, all members of a country should have an equal access to, civilized conditions of housing, or education, or health services. Okay? One of the implications is the social implication. But this definition also has a cultural implication, which means maintaining a civilized lifestyle, a civilized life. So it presupposes, this conception of social rights actually presupposes a common conception of what a civilized life is. Okay? In this way, it ignores or disregards cultural diversity within different groups, among different groups in a society, including the immigrants as a group. Okay? So, this conception of social rights has been fiercely criticized, actually, especially by the scholars of international migration. I'm going to give you some, examples of these criticisms towards the concept of social rights. First of all, what is a civilized life? Who defines it? Okay? Because, it implies a concept of civilized life, but what is it? Who defines what a civilized life is? It is a problem, especially when it comes to minority groups such as immigrants. Okay, excuse me. There are actually two political paradigms, as I said, about integrating immigrants. And these two different political paradigms have a conception of what a civilized life is and how the immigrants, the minority groups in general, but in particular the immigrants, should be integrated into this common civilized life. On the one hand, we have assimilationism. According to assimilationist policy, in other words, policy of melting pot, immigrants are supposed to give up their distinctive cultural identities so that everyone converts on the norms of civilized culture. So it supports a formation of common judgments and practices of civilized life. The this is the general framework of assimilationism, but we see two different types actually of assimilationism, which have some common points, but which have some divergences between themselves as well. One of them is new racism, and the other one is the republicanist assimilationism. New racism as a type of assimilationist policy. Okay, new racism implies that every nation has its own cultural values, has its own national cultural values and way of life, such that it cannot tolerate sharing its territory with those of another culture of immigrants, for instance. Okay? This concept, as you can imagine, is based on actually a superiority thesis. By superiority thesis, I mean the argument that immigrants with different cultural backgrounds should leave their incompatible and backward cultural norms for the civilized norms of immigrant country. Okay? Unlike the older versions of racism, it does not imply a biological superiority, but a civilizational or cultural superiority, as you can see. But still, there is a superiority thesis. The culture of the destination country is superior than the culture of the immigrant, of the original country of origin of the immigrants. So it is the immigrants who should give up on their cultural diversity in order to converge on a common and shared culture. Then we have another assimilationist policy, republicanist assimilationism. And this one, it implies that cultural differences in a nation should stay in private space. The public space is the space of political bonds and relations. It is assimilationist because it claims that, again, immigrants should give up on their on their different cultural practices and norms, but not for good. But they just have to leave it in private sphere. They shouldn't bring it to the public sphere. They can live whatever they want in their private homes, in their private lives. But when it comes to public space, there should be no cultural diversity or differences, because public space is not a cultural space, it's a political space. So again, as I said, immigrants should give up on their cultural, on their specific and incompatible, I want to emphasize that, incompatible cultural traits and norms. And this type of assimilationism is based on not a superiority thesis this time, but universality thesis. Universality thesis means civilized life is defined according to the universal norms and practices. I want to emphasize universal. Immigrants' cultural differences should and cannot let dominate the norms and practices of public sphere. So, again, immigrants should give up on their incompatible practices and norms, but this time not on the grounds that the immigrant country has a superior culture, but on the grounds that there are some universal norms and values, and if some specific cultural norms and values of immigrants are incompatible with that, they have to just give up on those incompatible elements of their culture. Okay? And as a conflicting paradigm, as a total different paradigm from assimilationism, we have multiculturalism, okay? As an alternative paradigm about how to integrate immigrants. Multiculturalism can be defined as a politics of recognition of cultural diversity. So cultural diversities should be respected and recognized and taken as a positive contribution to a society. So this paradigm does not expect the immigrants to give up on their cultural diversity, because it sees this cultural diversity as a wealth to a nation, not as a problem to be solved. Okay? But however high-sounding and inclusive this multiculturalism may seem to be, it does have some weakness points as well. So it has been criticized on some more or less reasonable grounds, actually. When we look at these criticisms, we can understand what it's about when it comes to multiculturalism better. Okay? So what are these criticisms towards recognition the cultural diversity in a nation? Okay? First of all, multiculturalism, according to its critics, ignores the diversities within the migrant communities. So, multiculturalism is against the conception of a homogeneous national culture. It says that there is cultural hybridity, there is a multiculturality in a society, and we should recognize this cultural diversity. But on the other hand, it just presupposes that migrant groups have a homogeneous culture in themselves. Okay? But actually, immigrant groups have some, differences or even conflicts among themselves as well. There are gender-based differences, class-based differences, sometimes sectarian differences or generational differences within themselves. So while multiculturalism criticizes a concept of homogeneous civilized life at a national level, it actually reproduces this very homogenization at the level of immigrant communities. Okay? This is one of the criticisms. Secondly, and as a result of this first problem, multiculturalism might sometimes disregard the rights of the disempowered groups, like women, for instance, within the immigrant groups, because the norms of the cultural norms are defined by more powerful groups in a society, at international, national, or ethnic or religious, whatever, at whatever level. Okay. So when it comes to migrant communities have some power structures as well. There are more powerful groups and less powerful or disempowered groups within the migrant communities. So when a homogeneous culture is reflected on a migrant group, this homogeneous culture is usually a culture which has been defined by powerful groups, and this disempowers some groups who might be against this definition of culture within the migrant groups. As I said, women are a good example of that. Okay? And lastly, too much focus on cultural differences or cultural diversity. I mean, multiculturalism puts too much focus on this topic. And that much focus on cultural diversity can lead to disregarding of some shared problems. Okay? Such problems that we share if we are living in a country, in a society, regardless of our belief systems or ethnicities or any cultural characteristics. When a group of people lives in the same country, they usually share some common problems, some common economic problems, some common social justice problems. So, putting too much focus on cultural politics or cultural debates might cover or disregard or ignore these common and shared problems, which can bring together migrants and local populations together, actually. So, as you can see, integrating immigrants is not an easy topic. Okay? In recent years and decades, Turkey has turned into a country of immigration as well, as you all know, I think. And we are all more or less familiar with all these debates and topics, actually. And it seems that we will be more familiar in the following years, considering the growing number of international immigrants or asylum seekers flowing into our country. So I hope that this short presentation gives you a little bit more insight about this, fierce and controversial topic about integrating immigrants. So, and think about our arguments, our argumentations, and conceptions about immigrants through the lenses of this, theoretical and conceptual framework. Thank you very much for watching me.